Hey there, this is the Penny on Your Thoughts podcast, and I am your host, Penny Chason. I'm a board-certified hypnotist, intuitive, and experiencer. This podcast is about tapping into your subconscious to create a more aligned and abundant life. By leveraging our subconscious, we can master our thoughts, frequency, and vibration. Fusing the conscious, subconscious, and our consciousness is the science of expansion and soul satisfaction. Each week, I'll share in-depth interviews or solo episodes. This podcast was created to share how you have the power to create infinite potential within you. It's my intention that you find this podcast empowering, inspiring, and full of possibility. Now grab your favorite beverage and let's go. Hey everybody, it's Penny again with another episode of the Penny on Your Thoughts podcast. I'm really excited today to have a guest who is someone that I have known for a while, and I love her energy, her personality, and she is an example of transitioning out of corporate and into entrepreneurship. She's a mother, a wife. So I want to take a moment and introduce you to Rita Hyland, my guest today. She's the creator of the Neuroleadership Growth Code, which is a practical, brain-based, proven framework for helping leaders break through the areas of stagnation and create remarkable results in her life. She grew up with her father, who was a colonel in the U.S. Army, and during that time, Rita cultivated a strong work ethic and a drive to succeed. From organizing her middle school canned food drive to leading almost every group, team, or organization she was a part of, Rita has always been encouraged by her efforts to work hard, be ambitious, and fully commit to every project. Once an executive, she was climbing the corporate ladder in Chicago's financial district, and she was successful by traditional standards. As she quickly rose through those ranks at work, she spent a lot of long hours, experienced exhaustion and stress that finally took their toll on her, and something had to change. And that's when Rita began studying models of performance, transformational psychology, and brain science so she could apply them to her own growth mindset. And the results were staggering. Rita discovered that transformation could be rapid and doesn't have to take years, when most often we only have so much time to take to change and build the impact that leads to legacy. Rita, thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, Penny, I'm so excited that I am finally here. Thank you.
One of the things that stands out to me as I read that bio is you mentioned something that so many high achievers have experienced, and that is that work ethic, hard work, and commitment has its place in everything that we do. That's how we're successful, is that we commit to what it is that we're doing. We make a decision to follow through. But through your career, when did you notice that hard work ethic, that stress, that pressure to perform, when did you recognize that something had to change?
Yeah, my first real wake-up call, as I sort of referenced in that description that you read of me, was when I was traveling downtown Chicago. I was on the L. It was a beautiful day. I was in my powder blue suit. I can see it well. And I was getting off and the L, and all of a sudden my body wouldn't move. And I was frozen. My breath was labored. And I realized at that point, my body was lit up with infection, and I ended up being put on short-term disability for over 2 months at 28. And so it was at that time that I knew that something had to give, and that I was in this place of performing and pleasing and perfecting and doing all the right things by traditional success, but they didn't feel it from my own standards. That was probably the first time that something had to give.
When you froze in that moment and you realized that something had to change, did you make the connection between the mental and emotional stress and pressure to the actual physical illness that you were having at that time? Because a lot of people don't recognize the impact of our
Yeah.
mind on our bodies.
That's a good point. I remember, I mean, I had to literally lay in bed with pain medicine for days. And I knew that it was something, that there was some type of connection. I was just beginning my own work and my own some self-awareness and self-personal growth work. And I knew that things weren't aligned, but I didn't know what it was. And I wasn't certain. I just knew that I needed to continue to pursue what was true for me, or I needed to pursue and look at it a little bit more. But I think you're right. Most people don't make the mind-body connection and know that whatever's going on in the inside means that's why my external world was looking like it was.
Exactly. When you had that moment, how long did it really take for you to make the shift
Yeah.
to decide that entrepreneurship was the way for you to go? Was it something that was instant, or were you just following a calling that something had to be different and bumping up against the paradigm of where you were not being that space for you?
Yeah, it's a good question. There was a moment, it was probably 2 years before I actually made the leap to my profession. And I just knew that when I was looking at my boss and my boss's boss, that I didn't want to be them, that I didn't want to, sometimes be coming in the dark in Chicago weather and on a train and leaving. And this was before I even had a relationship or I had children, but I knew that I wanted to be in control of and have the flexibility when that time came. And I thought, this is the time for me to identify my passion. I started to do some of my own personal growth work and found such remarkable change in such a short period of time. That's how I began to stumble upon my own experience of the profession I'm now in. And then I thought, everybody needs to know this. I couldn't believe it. But it came with being able, I was a one-man show, and it came with me being able to support myself and make that shift to be an entrepreneur. And it was really starkly different because I was in a very conservative workplace in the financial world with a lot of stability and the ESOPs and the 401ks. And it wasn't popular, neither the decision from many of those around me, and it wasn't popular, the profession I was going in. It was very alternative and young. You would say the word, it was loosely called coaching then, and you'd say that word and no one knew what the heck you were saying. And they're like, oh no, she has really flown the coop. I mean, what is she thinking? And it took a lot of self-talk and a lot of keeping myself up when I wasn't getting that approval to make the shift at that time. And this again was over 2 decades ago.
I think that it's still common. I mean, we go from this place of wanting to be someone who creates a dynamic in our world where we're making a difference, we're making impact, and we've done it within this structure. And we feel comfortable in that framework, yet at the same time, we're no longer comfortable in that framework. We're bumping up against the structures. And I remember my own journey when I just started hypnosis as a part-time thing, right? I just wanted to maintain my skills until I retired. And two things happened. One, oh my God, this is my passion. I love this. I feel free. And the other thing is people looking at you like you have three heads. And I think that comes from another place as well. So many people don't even recognize that entrepreneurship is a possibility for them. I never knew it was a possibility for me. Is that something that came into play as you're doing this self-talk and, you're supporting yourself through this decision when people around you are looking at you like you're crazy?
Yeah. Sometimes when, as we discuss it, I'm like, oh my God, how did I do that? it was definitely such a shift, so scary. I knew I was on my own in terms of figuring out how to both be proficient and powerful in my service, and then also being able to sell it to pay the bills. I didn't have a lot of role models who were doing it that I was looking at. I would say that it wasn't, you and I both know over the past 2 decades, the way of marketing is drastically different. We didn't have all of the features, and people were not working off their computers and doing Zooms as they were as much. I don't know. It was a calling. I do remember once I found what I knew what I was going to do. And I remember saying to myself, if it takes till 90, I'm going to figure out a way. And so there was a part of, and I didn't, as I said, I didn't have children. I was fortunate in some way. I hadn't really started. So I felt like this is my time to get it going. I knew it takes time. I had to give myself that space. And so I mastered how I was going to slowly in steps. I took a leap, but I did it in a way that I could survive and not jump off a cliff. I had started working part-time a little bit, asked that. The company never had allowed anybody to go part-time. I knew it was a leap for me to do it because I was managing people, and they said yes, because I said, I'm either going or I'm getting it. I'm doing it. It started to just be small steps that gave me more clarity.
Would you say that how others around you perceived your desired transition, would you say that was your biggest challenge as you made that transition, or was it something else?
I do think that was probably my biggest one then. I remember my dad saying to me, what do you do when the economy turns with this profession? And I can feel like it felt like a knife in my chest. In the organization, at this point, I had finally got the position that I had been working for the last decade. And so to give it up, I was the youngest doing this, it seemed crazy to many. I do think that was my biggest battle, how I was being perceived, because I did have an identity that was tied to my corporate background, that this is who I was. The funny story that I have is that I resigned, and on the day that I resigned, I don't tell this story a lot, but someone from the senior exec team contacted me and said, we're putting through our first, what was that? Our first like packages for laying people off. You need to attempt to get your job and not get it back. I ended up working this thing. I had an interview in front of 5 people, failed to get my job back. And then I got a package, which was like exactly the amount that I needed for this additional coach training. And you start to just see that I had to lean in, and that the universe started to come back to respond to me in kind. But one of the things that was really fascinating about it is that I still had to hold this job for 3 or 4 more months and walk around the organization as though I hadn't got my job back. So the humbling of the ego was humongous. And so I do think it was my greatest lesson, that I had to let go of what people thought of me. I was like, they are all apologizing that I'm not smart enough to get my job back. And I had a great identity stacked in being fabulous and so it was powerful, and it was a good lesson for me. I was starting though to see like, this is not a coincidence. And I was beginning to build obviously my own practice and getting my own lessons.
It's really empowering when that evidence comes back to us that we're on the right track. And that identity plays such a huge role in people's success when they do step out of corporate and make a change, whether it's midlife or a little bit earlier, because so many of our beliefs, our stories, our values are wrapped up in that identity. How have you taken that and translated it into what it is that you're doing in the Neuroleadership Growth Code?
I find, obviously, it's very good to have had my own experiences. I have compassion and understanding when leaders in their life get to a point where this is all they know. This has been their identity for so long. They're getting their acceptance, their validation through it. One of the things is it's the inside out method. It's understanding that things and the conditions on an external world can change, obviously, when we change it from the inside. Probably the biggest complaint I hear about people from the people in corporate world, men and women, but women in particular, is they're so tired of working so hard. And if they don't work hard, then they worry. And so, and these feelings, and so helping them reset and tune in and take challenge and rethink existing cultural beliefs as well as other conditioning that they have, and then being able to get their own evidence, just like I did, through actions. I always say ABC, actions bring clarity. It's starting to get your own evidence that you can reprogram and rewire that inside to create, and so that they can see that there is a different way, or that they can start to bring about, and they start to see the power, taking their power back and being able to see the power that they actually have in co-creating a different reality.
Now, most of the people who listen to the podcast will know what we mean by taking their power back. But would
Mhm.
you mind elaborating on that just a little bit for someone who may not really know what, as women,
Yeah.
we're talking about? Because as women, we juggle so many roles. You are a mother, you're a wife, you're a daughter, and I'm sure it has influenced all of your work.
Yeah. Taking our power back is it's not power in the traditional sense when I refer to it. It's when we start to see other people's vision or way as more right or more important than our own. For example, we might not speak up so as to not to rock the boat. We might be waiting to be dubbed for the next leadership role. We might be trying to appease even our family members just to keep the calm and keep the peace. So we start to give our power away when we stop making decisions based upon our own insight, wisdom, and tools. And so then taking it back means saying, okay, I'm coming back into me. I'm trusting me, which is very different. I'm not going to always have to be looking externally to bounce things off of external situations. And I'm going to start making decisions that are first for me, because when we do what's best for ourselves, it's always best for another. And I do find that we can feel victim to the world a lot, whether it's victim to the modern workplace, they are demanding this of me, or this, unwittingly train others to treat us. And what I see is that if another person is in that organization, or if there's another entrepreneur who is not working those same hours or is not doing it in that same way, then there's got to be a way. Truth is consistent.
Do you sometimes find that you're bumping up against something and you're not sure exactly what it is? You've done the mindset work and the affirmations, but yet there's something coming up. Then I want to introduce you to Amplify Success. Amplify Success is a very short mini training that I have put together, walking you through a process that allows you to shine the light on your blind spots and then taking you through a simple practice that will allow you to reframe and reprogram your mind around these blind spots. This is something that has become a natural part of my daily life. I would love to share it with you. You can go to pennychason.com/amplify and start rewiring those beliefs today.
And it's not a matter of the external circumstances. It's a matter of what's going on with us. And I had to take my power back by being okay and humbled that it didn't matter what anybody thought about me. My truth was that I was meant to be an entrepreneur in this specific field. And if I gave my power away, I would have stayed at the organization for the corporate world, because that's what everyone else thought was in my best interest.
When you made that transition, what were some of the fundamental things that, or maybe just share one, that was the biggest change for you internally to make this shift? Because you said you studied some transformational psychology, the inner work, brain science. What was it for you that helped you bridge that gap?
One of the things was, in fact, appreciating myself or valuing myself. I did a lot of inner work to get to that place where I wasn't continually looking externally for my validation and my acceptance. And so being okay with people not being happy with me, people not approving, disagreeing. I consider myself a recovering people pleaser. Today, a lot of people would not believe that because I'm very strong and firm on the way I speak at times, but I really was way too into the approval. And it's something I think comes off in layers. I think we might always have some motivation of it, but we are able to see. I always say our first thought and our second thought. The first thought might always be there that, oh God, that person's annoyed with me. The second thought is being able to be in choice about how we respond. And I think that's probably the biggest thing the learning that allowed me to sell myself. I think we talk about, if you're in an organization or in the corporate world, you're oftentimes selling something. You're not selling yourself as much. You're selling a product or service. You get into entrepreneurship and you are selling yourself. You're selling something that's dear to you. And so it really does take a level of respect and value for yourself, internal, versus hustling to get other people's approval and constantly tuning in. Because what you find is when you start doing that, I always say those choices made in fear start getting you way off the moving sidewalk of life. And so you have to make one decision that puts you in fear, that makes the next decision in fear. And then your little choo-choo train's all sitting on, up on a hill, and you've got a real mess going on that needs to be corrected, I guess, if you will.
What I really want to reflect back on what you said, to take what you shared and put it in terms that I often use, is developing awareness.
Mhm.
When we have awareness of how those thoughts and those beliefs creep in, we have a moment of choice. And
Mhm.
that's where the real power is. And you brought up again recovering people pleaser. When you work with clients, how big of a role does boundaries play in that work?
Yeah. Big, big. I'd say that I think that oftentimes of three things that we're usually pursuing, and each of us might have a little bit more. One might be the approval that we're talking about. The other is control, and the other is safety. I need to control all of this for it to go, or I don't feel safe enough to put myself out there, or we're continually seeking validation. No one comes to me and says, I have a boundary issue. Let's put it that way. But we start to see it when we understand why we're making decisions that aren't in our best interest. It's because we have weak boundaries. Starting to get comfortable with something that's been traditionally very uncomfortable I think we surprise ourselves in how senior or how titled. I had this misconception when I was young that when we get to this magic age, we all are going to be wise beyond our years, that everything is smooth. And it doesn't matter how established or how senior individuals are. You can still have a place where we're operating from fear-based thoughts and patterns that are leading us to still give our boundaries away, or to do things that I have a lot of people that wake up and say, I've spent a lifetime, I didn't make any of the choices to get here. They're seasoned, successful individuals. They just did what they thought they should. That would be an example of giving your power away and having few boundaries. And so it's really different at this point, sometimes later in life, to be able to change those patterns and conditioning. It doesn't have to be difficult, but it's different for sure.
Yeah, I'm curious to know what percentage of your clients are male
Mhm.
versus female, because we also have cultural differences in the corporate mentality and success and what that looks like. Because I actually worked with someone over a year ago, and we reached a point in the work together where I point blank asked, when was the last time that you made a decision about something that you wanted to do? And this person was almost 40 years old, and they said, I've never been given the opportunity to make a choice for myself. And
Mhm.
I generally don't get emotionally entangled with my clients. I pride myself on being able to be compassionately detached. That's how I'm able to be objective and
Yeah.
lead them from point A to point B without projecting. But in that moment, and for a brief moment, my heart actually felt sad. It's
Mhm.
just that human empathetic response. We've been talking a little bit about women and your journey, but how does this play out with men as well?
I work with a lot of men, actually, and the percentage breakdown is interesting and changes all the time. It's definitely 50-50, sometimes more men. I feel for men, I think, first of all, I think leadership is an isolated spot. Entrepreneurship is an isolated spot. And what I find is that they certainly haven't challenged their thoughts. They've been conditioned just as much. And I have as much empathy sometimes for men as for women. I think they need it because they've been put into to places where they don't feel like they have choices either. For traditionally, they should be providing, traditionally in the way they've been conditioned. And so they oftentimes they're some of the ones who've never had a thought of giving to themselves as well. How do these play out differently? I think in the past couple of years, things have been changing. Obviously, I think the lines between career and home life, especially for women, but as much for men, has really been blurred. And so people are really reevaluating corporate world and entrepreneurship. They're evaluating their careers, what is important to them personally versus professionally, and how to harmonize these. I think there's a lot of challenges that people are facing with it because they've been doing things the way they were supposed to be, going to work at 8, coming home at 5. And so there was some structure to that. Now it is people who aren't used to choice are, or having to rethink things for themselves. And it's different.
How do you find that you best support them in that process of choice? Because a lot of people like to think that things are a light switch, and we've touched on the layers. So how do you support people in feeling that they can exert these boundaries, take their power back, and finally follow through on choices that support them and what they want?
One of the things I think is really important is I don't believe anybody believes what I say. I say, I don't even want you to believe what I say. I want you to go out and try it and practice it. But I do have frameworks, and when they can see, and I'm very good, I think, at showing them patterns where this is all playing, this has played out so many times. And then they start to see that these things aren't coincidences, and that this is continuing to do it at the same rate is going to get them more of the same. And also where they've already done things where they have created magic and how that was created. Sometimes they assess it to something that it isn't, that it didn't previously have our thoughts aligned with our feelings and our habits and actions to create the result, or that our identity wasn't involved in it. So they're just like, I just did hard work, or it was luck, or that's the way it happened. So when you start to really expose it, give them their own evidence, and or have them create evidence for themselves, the brain can start to recondition itself, to retrain, to reprogram. And it feels so liberating. My work is, I couldn't believe that some of what we talk about, Penny, hasn't taught in grade school. I think that it can be very simple and powerful. And when people see it, your life's never going to be the same once you start to uncoil the stuff that's not working for you. And really, as we've said, sometimes it's an unlearning of the first half so that we can be who we really are, or evolve further in the second half.
I really love that you touch on helping them to see the evidence, because I often go through this with people who are clients, or when I do group programs, I talk about building that evidence, because as entrepreneurs, you and I know the phrase of getting out of your comfort zone.
Hmm.
And I'm big on reframes, because the whole idea of getting out of your comfort zone doesn't seem very appealing, enticing, or comfortable. So why would you want to do it? So I've reframed it the growth zone. We're
Mm-hmm.
stepping into the growth zone. But I often tell people, you have to feed your mind the evidence. You have to let it know, yes, this is possible. And I love having people write down wins. I love reflecting things back to them. I actually think sometimes my clients get tired of me pointing out their wins. I don't do it for me.
Yeah.
I do it for them,
Yeah.
because so many times through life, we just bypass right over our own accomplishments, because we're looking for the next thing
Yeah.
that we have to do.
I think that it's such a great example. I find, the gift sometimes of leaders, or executives, or those business owners, is that we're seeing in advance, or that we call them the visionaries. But a lot of times that means that their focus or attention is on mitigating risk. As I like to say, they say, where's the problem that could potentially happen? When our attention is there, we have to be conscious and deliberate about not creating that. It's your gift, it's your motivation, it's your coping mechanism, but it can be, when overused. And that's what's happened. I think that we've gotten to this point in midlife where, as they say, what's gotten us here isn't going to get us there. That identity that we've had this whole time, and people are starting to really, they've maxed out, and they are realizing where they're going isn't sustainable. And they know it by the way it feels, that it's feeling really bad, and that something's got to give, or that it's the cost to their kids and their family and themselves, their own health. Really looking at a new approach. To some extent, you and I have talked about new identity, who you're going to be in that next phase, and what that really requires, redefining who you can become and the work you want to really do.
Yeah. What is your vision for your impact through this work?
I have done a lot of work one-to-one, and then I've done training within organizations at times, a lot. And right now, My big vision is that we are bringing, it's something I have a program that's being developed. It's called the Inner Game Advantage, and bringing that to companies, because I believe I work with people in organizations and as well as business owners. I believe that those in leadership positions, they have the greatest opportunity to have that trickle down effect. And it only takes one person to how you're affecting the person that you're leading, then how he goes home and treats his children and their belief system, all that. It's considerable. My vision is to create thousands of bright lights or leaders who are conscious leaders or self-actualized leaders who are self-aware. I mean, the number one indicator we know to individual success is their, in essence, self-awareness, their ability to understand their own feelings and manage them. And then the next level of that is to be able to empathize and understand others' feelings and to be able to equip them. So that it's doing it yourself. My first level is equipping the leader with their own, elevated self-awareness. They're deliberately affecting things and then going out and equipping others to do the same. And so my vision is pretty big that this is being brought into organizations, and it's a hybrid of both, because I have a deep appreciation and your work so profound, because there is some one-to-one. It's a lot of fun to be able to see people transform so profoundly from that intimate, really getting at. And I also think there is great service when we are all in community, seeing it and learning from each other in group coaching. So this program that I have is a hybrid of those two for leaders.
I think a hybrid approach is great. I think these days, being post-pandemic and all of the change that happens, I think that people really value that intimate one-to-one, knowing that people get them and taking them to that next level. So I have a question for you now
Yeah.
that wasn't planned, and it's just a little bit of a jog off of what we're talking about, but I think it goes to the heart of who you are and some common beliefs that you and I have. Your business isn't just a business for you. Your coaching isn't just coaching for you. It's about impact, but not only for your clients. Share a little bit about how giving back has impacted your life and your success as an entrepreneur, because I love that.
Yeah. I mean, I feel my clients give to me every day. Sometimes I think many people can say that they get more sometimes from their clients than they feel like they're giving to them. It may be giving and receiving share the same frequency energetically. I think that's that whole circle. We all want to know that we matter. We all want to live a life. And there's some poem that I think is beautiful. I gave you blue, you gave me yellow, together we made green. And I love that, because we're giving different things and we're able to bring different things to each other. And together we're making something new, we're elevating things. And I am very gifted. I think the other gift in my work is that you have to walk your talk. So I am consistently held to a standard. I hold myself to a standard. I can't ask someone to do something I'm not doing. That's the gift that I get by being able to be involved in other people's journeys or in their worlds, and along this path with them. I'm the luckiest person in the world. My profession is, and what I do, I don't do it. None of us do everything the way anybody else does it. We're all very unique. I just feel very, very blessed. When you have a passion, or when you have that whisper, like I did, the calling, as you might say, I do encourage you to answer the call, that the universe aligns, things align to support you. And what I think I would tell where I'm at this time, I started before I had children, and my oldest is 20 now, 20, 18, and 14. And so I've had stress in my life. I've allowed myself to get into thinking I'm as good as my accomplishments. And if the month's down, to measure myself by that, or if it's high, to think I'm grand because of that. But my current self might tell my past self rather, that it's all going to work out, and allow yourself to be in the flow, and give yourself grace that those things will also find your peace on a consistent basis. And my number one job every day is to be at peace, because that's when my performance is going to be at its highest. That's when my gifts and my contributions will be at their best. So you're correct. I was asked, I have coaches, I consume support in my life and of all kinds. And I encourage others to do the same, that we all need that emotional support to process life. And so what I would say is take the leap. Life is short. And just begin in the small. Sometimes I ask my clients, what's the biggest thing that made, when they come back, they're like, you're not going to believe my success, or what's happening. Everything I put out there is happening. And I said, well, tell me, what's the one thing that made it all? And they're like, you just told me to just take the next action, just take the next step and know that the next step will bring that clarity. I would just say, find a way to be at peace, even if nothing is to change around you, because from that place, you're going to bring forth a lot of the things that you desire. And life is meant to be full of things. I think I've tried to control. I'll be one of those who is like, if it's smooth, that means it's good. No, life is going to have zigzag. Oh my gosh. I think I was saying I've had these kids and I never imagined them out at this point where they're grown up. And make sure, I think my other point would be what I've learned. I always like to tell my mistakes, but make sure that when you're making your vision, and you do have to have a vision. I think that for entrepreneurs, it's otherwise you can get very reactive in your day. But when you always have a vision, because if you don't have a vision, someone else is going to make it for you and you might not like what they have created for you. So have your own vision. Make sure that you create your personal life first, your personal vision first, and then your professional vision around that. That is what I would say. Because so often as achievers in the entrepreneurial world, we are driven to achieve, and we often begin with our professional vision, and then our personal vision takes a back seat, and we can get our priorities a little bit mixed up.
Yeah. I just want to take everyone back to that moment where you talked about peace. Even if nothing changes, to find a way to be at peace. And from that place of peace, then if you have been putting the external first, if you have been putting the career first, you can make that shift and put yourself first, because peace allows you to do that without being reactive. If there's one sentence that you could leave people with that would inspire them to take that journey, to look within, or be daring enough to take it to that next, what would it be?
You're much more powerful than you've previously imagined. That's it's in one sentence. I think that's it's just, you're so much more powerful. And that when you unleash and unlock the conditions to tap that, oh my gosh, I think that's what people find. It doesn't have to be hard. We are so much more powerful, and exploring that and allowing for it. It is so fun and liberating on the other side. You'll never want to go back.
Absolutely. I 1000% agree. And we've definitely been conditioned that things have to be difficult, complex, convoluted, and it really is that simple. And to just go back to have that awareness and know that awareness gives you the gift. You had something for the audience today. Would you mind sharing a little bit about that?
Oh, this is a morning mindset management system or process. It takes 5 minutes. It's 5 questions that all have science that explains and backs why they support us being able to make huge shifts. I think every day, those with whom I'm working with have extraordinary expectations of their performance level, and they don't fuel themselves with the necessary mind management that it takes to perform at those levels. It's like, I liken it to having a luxury car like a Ferrari and putting in the lowest grade octane or no octane, no gas at all. You just wouldn't do that. But we do it to ourselves, where we have these high expectations of high performance, and we don't do anything to fuel ourselves to actually create those results. There's explanation of the 5 questions that you answer every morning, and people find that they have incredibly improved performance and my well-being and impact just from answering those.
So we'll have the link to that in the show notes for everyone. Where can they find you on social media if they want to get more of you?
Rita Hyland Coaching at LinkedIn. I'm at Rita Hyland, and on Instagram. Those are the two that I spend most of my time. And certainly you can email me at rita@ritahyland.com.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much for being here today, Rita.
Thank you, Penny, for having me.
All right,
Appreciate it.
everyone. So if you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment, screenshot it, share it to your Instagram stories, share it with your friends so that more people have the opportunity to understand one, just how powerful we are, how they can regain power in their lives if they have spent year after year giving, people pleasing, and overachieving, and to remind them that when they are aware, they have the power of choice to change in that moment. Much love to everybody. See you next week. I really appreciated having you join me today for this episode of Penny on Your Thoughts. I would really appreciate it if you would take a moment and head over to your favorite podcast platform and leave a positive review about the podcast. It helps me to reach more people, to help them to enlighten, elevate, and expand their lives. Be sure to subscribe to the show if you haven't already, and I look forward to seeing you back here again next week.